Welcome to On the Corner of Main Street, presented by Plaza Hotel and Casino in downtown Las Vegas. Here is Plaza CEO Jonathan Jossel, Russell Aaron, Gary Vickery, and I'm your host, Lisa Melmed. As we wait for the Nevada governor's permission to open our doors, we're learning that many businesses here in Las Vegas and the rest of Nevada are being allowed to reopen with strict social distancing guidelines. In the meantime, we want to present an episode we recorded before the shutdown. It's with Joe Asher, the CEO of William Hill, the largest sportsbook operator in the U.S. and the Plaza's sportsbook partner. And one bit of good news as we record, while the Plaza and other casinos are not open, William Hill is ramping up its online gaming. As you know, online sports betting is legal so long as you're physically in the state of Nevada when you use a smartphone app to make your bets. A problem, however, is that people wanting to open new online accounts haven't been able to, since you have to register in person and fund your account with cash. But starting today, William Hill is opening drive-up locations around Las Vegas to let people open new accounts or put money in existing accounts. And one of them is under the dome at the Plaza. Now to the podcast. How's everybody doing today?
Hey, how's it going, Lisa?
Hey, Lisa.
Good.
Good morning.
Good.
I'm doing great.
Morning.
What are we talking about today, Lisa?
Well, did you know that the Plaza had the first sports book inside of a casino in Las Vegas?
I did not know that. Jonathan, you know that?
I knew that. I think that was back in the 70s.
Yes.
Plaza was known for its sports book. And today I'm very excited because we're going to be joined by Joe Asher, who's a good friend and sportsbook legend, frankly, at this point, because he's pioneering the great chase to get licenses across the country. I'm sure we'll hear about that, but it's great to have him because from where the sportsbooks were in the 70s to where it is today, the industry's changed dramatically. So, yeah, I did know that, actually.
Do you bet on sports?
I do bet on sports. I have bet on sports since I was probably 15 years old. I remember my parents catching me sports betting when I was a young kid. It was online. There was no protections back then, so sports betting online back in early 2000s was, or in the late 90s even, was very possible. And funnily enough, I still sports bet today. That's not the funny part. I still sports bet today, but in my licensing process, my sports betting habit was brought up because when I had to put forward all my bank statements to get my gaming license, one of the things that became apparent was that I had been placing bets in the UK while I was in the US, which under the new laws had become illegal. I didn't know that at the time. And I actually helped the Gaming Control Board identify a major problem, which was people in the US were sports betting offshore in the UK while on US soil, which today is now not possible because all the IP addresses have been blocked. Basically, you probably know more about this than I do, Russ. How they technologically know where you are and don't allow you to bet on sports. But it came up in my licensing, and funnily enough, Joe Asher was in the crowd at my licensing, not for me, for a different licensing matter. And one of the companies I had sports bet with while I was in the US was William Hill. And so he was like fascinated that, wow, how were you doing this? We have to make sure that this is protected.
So what you're saying is you're the reason why when I leave Nevada, the Nevada state line, I can't bet on my mobile device.
They know where you are.
That is solely because of you.
I think I helped educate them. I think I was a great test for them.
Didn't they try to use you as an example, or they wanted to base things around you because of what they found?
I don't know about that, but they definitely tried to make an example of me that doing what I was doing was illegal, and the Gaming Control Board questioned me at length about what I knew and how I was doing it. I think they did want to send a message that this is not allowed.
Is there anything you didn't tell them? Like you still have a hidden secret?
No, told them everything. Told them everything, and I'm glad to say I got approved. But I do love to sports bet, to answer your question, Lisa. I would call it a hobby of mine.
What's your favorite thing to bet on?
I don't think I have a favorite thing because I just love it. I can now, sadly, last year I got into betting on baseball. I never bet on baseball. I was always just NBA, NFL, European sports, soccer. But now ice hockey and baseball had become an interest of mine too. So
Are you betting on actual teams, or are you taking like pitchers over each other? Or like
every day a different pick.
Interesting.
Could be anything.
Do you
Could be
take tips from Oscar Goodman?
That man is 0 for 100. I never heard of him giving one winning tip. He called me the other day with a hot tip. They lost by 2 points. It was fantastic. So,
Jonathan, what's the worst sports bet you've made? You had so much
you
confidence and it
know,
was just losing.
Gary, I remember.
I like this question.
There's one that always sticks out to me. I wanted to say I was probably 18 years old. I was in England, and one of my parents' friends was a big horse better. He told me and my friends, there's a horse that's a shoo-in for this win. I'll never forget his name. His name was Fusaiki Pegasus. You can Google him. He's a very famous horse.
I can't
How do you
spell
spell
that.
that?
There's no way.
He was like a Japanese purebred of some sort of amazing lineage. Anyway, we all stayed up, and the race was in the US at the time. We were in London, so 8 hours ahead. So it was probably like we stayed up till about 2 a.m. to watch this race. And Fusaiki Pegasus was the favorite. We all bet on him. We were all excited. Came stone cold last. Didn't even challenge. It was unbelievable. It was like that for some reason that one's always. I've had a lot of losers, but that one really sticks with me. I don't see sports betting as I'm not an advantage guy. I don't research in depth. It's a pure hobby.
I was going to ask, like,
And it brings some excitement to the sports.
Exactly.
You know.
do you know any stats about things like you do follow soccer, and do you have things that you've just always said, I know this to be true, and you're going to bet on?
Very rarely do I have any. No, I have no inside information. It's just pure instinct and enjoyment.
What do you think about a casino owning its own sports book so you can give rewards through the players club of the casino? Is there a difference between owning and leasing the sports book?
Yeah, was there an opportunity in 2011 after the remodel for the Plaza to keep their own sports book, or was the plan always to go directly to William Hill?
Well, okay, so Lisa, you're asking about benefits and points, which is slightly different to the question of would we have our own sportsbook. So when I came out here in 2007, we actually did the Plaza operate its own sportsbook. Now remember, I was on the real estate side, I wasn't in the gaming operation, so it was a little different for me. But the Plaza was owning and operating its own sportsbook, and it wasn't until 2008, I believe, Joe will confirm, when we actually leased the book out to Brandywine, which subsequently became William Hill. My opinion on the matter is sports books are amenities. They're not really big money makers in individual properties. In fact, in some places they're considered a loss leader, but you got to have them because it brings people in, it gives you another market to, and you got to have them. They're a necessary part of our business, especially with the big sporting events and from the NFL season to Super Bowl, from March Madness. All of these World Series are some of the biggest days in the year, the horse racing, big races. So you got to have them, but they don't make money on standalone basis very often, if at all. I mean, we weren't making money when we had it ourselves. Leasing it out guaranteed us some revenue. And the way that they're able to do it is they have multiple stores all over the state at the time, or the country now, where they have enough volume to make it make sense.
We are now joined by Delaware native and once the youngest track announcer in North America, CEO of William Hill US since 2012, Joe Asher. Welcome to On the Corner of Main Street.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me. Everything ties back to Delaware.
Delaware.
State.
How did you get to Vegas from Delaware?
I went from Delaware actually to New York City. Lived in New York City for a number of years, and then summer of 2006, my wife and I loaded up the car, drove cross country, and which was fun. First time I'd ever done that. And
how long did it
wound
take?
up in Las Vegas. Did it about 2 weeks, and we were in no particular hurry.
Okay.
Just went to some of the national parks, went to some sort of tourist destinations, went to the Lincoln Presidential Library in Springfield, Illinois. That was kind of fun.
Never done that. I actually should try and do that one day when I have 2 weeks to spare to try and cross the
Mount
country.
Rushmore. Went to Mount Rushmore. That was really neat to see. It was fun. It was a good trip.
Nice.
And here we are.
And here we are. What made you decide to move to Vegas and do that 2-week drive?
Yeah, well, so I grew up around the gambling business, and my dad was a gambler back in Delaware, and he'd bet on anything, right? He'd play cards. I was shooting dice in the back of a butcher shop in Wilmington when I was 11 years old. And then I read this book by a guy named Ken Houston, who was the first guy to really have a card counting system that he used at casinos with a team of spotters. And so I read his book and learned to count cards. Probably I was about 12 or 13. Went to got a job working at the racetrack when I was 16.
You learned to count cards at 12 or 13 years old?
Yes. Yep.
And
went to Atlantic City for the first time when I was 14.
Did you use the technique?
I did. But the issue is you have to have really a team of people to really do well. Otherwise, it's a real grind. It was a real grind.
Were you able to gamble at 14?
Not legally.
They weren't checking IDs or anything?
No, so, it's kind of a funny story. I don't think I've ever told it before, but, so everything was about gambling when I was growing up. So I had learned to count cards, and, my dad was always looking for an edge, gambling-wise. And so, and I had gone down to Atlantic City with him a few times, but I couldn't get into the casino floor because, I was underage and they'd card me and take me out. So he comes up with this great idea to take me to a costume shop in Wilmington and get a fake mustache. And then we used that to go to the casinos in Atlantic City.
That's
and that worked. There were no issues. That worked. No problem.
No problem.
Do you have a picture of that?
I don't. I wish I did.
Do you still have the mustache?
I don't. God, no. It was a long time. That was a long time ago. But it's it was a unique environment to say the least to grow up in. The butcher shop, I remember it very well. It was the corner of 8th and King Street in Wilmington, and they'd close at 5:00, and at 5:00 and 2 seconds, a dice game would start in the back of the butcher shop, and we'd start shooting dice in the back of the butcher shop, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but that was just kind of the environment of it all. And working at the racetrack was great. I met some wonderful people, some friends of mine who I'm very close with today. Same kind of thing, though. It all revolved around gambling.
Was this at Delaware Park?
It was at Brandywine Raceway.
Okay.
For the most part, that was sort of the main track for me. Delaware Park was running in those days, and I'd go to Delaware Park, but was working at Brandywine. And the same kind of thing where it was all about gambling. I remember, payday was on Tuesday, and at some point between Tuesday and the next Tuesday, a lot of people would run out of money, and you'd be borrowing money from somebody else, and everybody, was lending money back.
So they saw a spike in the betting handle on payday and the few days after payday. I always find that depressing that happens, but I guess it is a real thing.
Oh, it's a real thing. I mean, the other thing would be around when government checks arrived. Mm-hmm. You'd see a little spike when people had money. At the time, the DuPont company was a big employer in Delaware, and in the day after, they paid people, you'd see a little bit of bump in business as well. And that continues to this day. I was we opened up a race book in Miami recently, and I was down there right after the Super Bowl. And there was a pretty good crowd on the casino floor in the middle of the afternoon. And the general manager said to me, business has been pretty good after the Super Bowl because, all the Uber drivers and bartenders and, people in the service industry had made a lot of money, during Super Bowl week. And now they were done and had money to spend.
Yeah, I remember when we used to own the Western down the street on 11th and Fremont, the best gaming days was the day after payroll, and it was always depressing to me that even our own employees were down there spending their payroll checks in that place. I mean, that's what it relied on, was payday, and then it would slow down for a few days after that and then pick back up. But
yeah, I never really thought about it as particularly depressing. I mean, and look, a lot of people live, paycheck to paycheck, and you get paid, and you do what you want to do with it, and some people might want to go buy something, or some people want to go out to a dinner or go out and have a few drinks, and some people want to gamble with it.
Yeah.
Just a choice of what they want to do.
So in the butcher shop, were you running the operation, or were you
No, I was just
partaking
shooting
in-
dice.
Okay.
I was just shooting dice. I didn't work in the butcher shop, but it was a dice game that was going on. And there was other gambling going around downtown Wilmington. We called them bookie joints, but where my dad would go to either bet the horses or bet on sports, which is sort of how I first got tuned into sports betting.
Okay.
And I remember another place where it was where there'd be a poker game on the weekends, and Sunday, they'd have deli meat, and you'd go in, you'd have lunch, and my dad would play poker in the afternoons. The football games would be on TV, so you'd bet the football games as well. And it was sort of down a flight of stairs. And every once in a while, the police would come by just to check, make sure everything was okay, say hello. They never busted the place or anything, so I don't know what the arrangement might have been. But when you're a kid, this is just normal, right? I didn't know anything different, so to me, this was just all normal.
So how did you get from there to CEO of William Hill?
Yeah.
I think you just cut out about 20 years, maybe more.
I was going to say, you're being kind to me on age. So I was working at the racetracks and basically paid my way through school, working at the racetracks in Delaware and also in Massachusetts. I worked at a racetrack up there,
Okay.
Foxborough Raceway. And I was working at Brandywine, and then Brandywine closed right at the time when I was finishing up college. I somehow managed to stay in school through all of this, which was no easy feat. But that's, a whole nother episode. Just decided I was going to go to law school, and applied to law school and managed to do pretty well on the admission test. And it was kind of touch and go as to actually graduating college.
What did you want to do with that law degree?
Save the world, probably. I think my
Run for president.
Yeah, no, not really run for president, perhaps, but I didn't have a defined idea of what type of law I was going to do or anything like that. But it was kind of touch and go to get through to get through high school and to get through college, because I was much more interested in working at the racetrack and being around the racetrack than I was sitting in a school classroom. And then I also didn't have a whole lot in common with a lot of people in school, because I was sort of doing my thing around the racetrack and not really the world's best student. But anyway, somehow got in to law school, somehow graduated from college, which was the harder thing, did pretty well in law school. And then wound up working for a big New York law firm that had a...
Was it commercial law?
Commercial, corporate and commercial litigation.
Okay.
For a big New York law firm called Skadden Arps. They had a office in Delaware, which is where I started, and then moved to New York City and worked there for a while. And it was okay, right? I wasn't one of these people who hated practicing law. Like some people just get into it and they hate it. That wasn't me for sure. But I didn't love it. I didn't have the passion for it. And I was still much more interested in the gambling business. I wasn't the guy who'd come home and read the latest Supreme Court opinion. I'd want to come home and read the racing form, right? Or read, the sports pages and that kind of thing. So then I started thinking about, some way to get back into the gaming business. So I wind up leaving the law firm and going to work for a client. And my job was to try to get into the gaming business. Then wound up moving out to Las Vegas in 2006 after that car ride we talked about earlier. And wound up ultimately, about a year later, starting a sports betting company.
That's 2007.
2007 is when we started working on it, yes.
Right in the midst of the recession.
Yeah, well, it was a brilliant timing for starting a business for sure. We opened for business in 2008, summer of 2008.
Wow.
But it took about a year to get it, to get set up and get the people, get the financing, get licensed, all that kind of stuff. And We opened for business July 1st, 2008, up in Elko, Nevada, small little town in northeastern Nevada.
That was your first book.
Our first book.
And if I'm not mistaken, you named the business Brandywine, which is in sort of homage to your first job in the business.
Exactly. When you start a company, you get to pick the name.
Right.
And that was my way to sort of go back to my youth, I suppose. I literally and figuratively grew up around Brandywine. So much of my youth was spent at this racetrack. Both, as a kid going there with my dad, and I used to love going there with my dad. That was sort of, the time I'd get to spend with my dad. Right. That was kind of our one-on-one bonding time, and I loved it. And then, as a teenager when I was working there and everything. So it's always been a special place. As I said earlier, some of my closest friends tie back to that time. If you come to my office, you see, photos of Brandywine. And so
Brandywine wasn't a person, though. It was just the track.
It was a racetrack. It's an area, actually, in Wilmington. Brandywine, there's a river called the Brandywine River. And there was actually a Revolutionary War battle that was fought along the Battle of the Brandywine. And actually, the Americans lost that, and General Washington retreated at the time. And so there was a Brandywine Raceway. There's a Brandywine High School. There's the Brandywine name in that little part of the.
I'm actually embarrassed because I thought that the Plaza was your first book in Nevada, but you just said Elko.
Correct. Plaza.
So we weren't your first love. I thought we were.
Well, you were my first love. It just took me, a little while to get the love reciprocated, I guess. It was the fourth. I think it was the fourth book. It was we had two in Elko. We had to open in Elko first because of the licensing issues, and to get the non-restricted gaming license, and then a couple of days after that, we opened in Reno, which is now called the Grand Sierra Resort. Okay. And then the Plaza was August of 2008.
Just going back on your travels from Delaware and New York to Las Vegas, what was your family and your friends saying about you making that trip all the way across the country to hopefully open up a race and sports book, which is something that was always a passion to you, but I'm sure other people thought of it as more of a hobby than it was a full career path to where you are now.
Yeah, well, when I didn't come to Vegas for the specific idea of doing the race and sports book, right? I was coming because I was working. I was doing some stuff around mobile gambling on mobile devices. But when I always had a lifelong fascination with Las Vegas, right? When I was a little kid, there was this TV show called Vegas with Robert Urich, and the facade of the Barbary Coast was in the opening credits, and I just sort of loved that, and sort of growing up around gambling and going to Atlantic City and Vegas. I'd never been, right? It was sort of this icon. And then first time I came to Vegas was in 1994, after I got out of law school. And I just thought it was the greatest thing, right? I mean, I just loved it because I'd seen it on television for so long and had grown up around gambling. And, here it is, Las Vegas, right? And, it took me another 12 years to actually move here. I started coming out maybe 3-4 times a year, like a lot of people, at the time, it was Delaware, then I moved to New York, and I'd come out for, long weekend or opening weekend of March Madness, like so many people do,
right.
And all that kind of thing. And just love coming out here. And, I guess mixed feelings in it. I sort of wish, as soon as I got here in 94, I should have just stayed, right? There's definitely that aspect of everything.
Because of the opportunity back then.
The opportunity back then, and just really being in a place where I sort of felt like I belong in this place, right? Although the flip side to that is I would have never met my wife, and I wouldn't have the beautiful family that I have today had I been out here. So who knows what life would have turned out to be. So. That's how I temper my disappointment with, not getting out here sooner. But
as somebody from the tri-state area as well, going to Atlantic City every, 2 to 3 times a month or 2 to 3 times a year, whatever I would like to admit, coming out to Las Vegas for the first time, Atlantic City pales in comparison to when you get out to Las Vegas, and it's the full Monty. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, there's no comparison.
Right.
We used to, when I was working at Brandywine, the races were at night. And then I would say probably a couple of times a week, maybe 2-3 times a week, we'd drive to Atlantic City because you didn't have casinos in Delaware or Pennsylvania back then. We'd drive to Atlantic City and, we'd gamble all night or until our money ran out. And, we'd put $10 under the car mat for gas and tolls to make sure we could get back home.
Smart.
Right? And, and then we'd go right back to work because we had to be at work first thing in the morning. Right. And, so you'd go straight in. It was great.
When you were coming out here, or when you did come out here, was there anyone in the industry that you sort of looked at and said, this is where we want to get to? Who was sort of the inspiration, role model, sportsbook people at the time, between, I guess, the 90s and early 2000s when you eventually came out here?
Well, I don't. Before I got out here, the one memory that sticks was those old commercials of Steve Wynn with Frank Sinatra at the Golden Nugget, right? That iconic commercial of Sinatra tipping them $5 for the towels or something, right? It was just, so I kind of was very cognizant of that. And there used to be signs in Atlantic City about the Mirage opening, and I remember thinking, what's the point of that? Because you're in Atlantic City and this casino is opening in Las Vegas. I wasn't sophisticated enough to kind of get the point to it. And then, when I got out here, I had this fascination, of course, with the sports betting business. And when I sort of got around to planning what ultimately became Brandywine, a lot of it was just, walking around actually in downtown Las Vegas and seeing what the sports books looked like at the time and thinking about what might work if you did something different.
How did you and Jonathan meet? Do you remember the first time you met?
I don't know if I remember the first time we met, but it would have been, not long after he showed up here at the Plaza, sort of representing Tamaris. When was that? Like 2000?
I moved out here in 2007, and then you probably came in here in 2008.
2008.
But I wasn't really. I was here, but I wasn't involved in any of the operation. You probably dealt with other people, and then it probably wasn't really until 2010 when we closed down for the remodel that we actually spent more time together and got to know each other. I would think was around the that window, and then we shut down in 2010. Did the remodel. There was a little bit of an issue with whether you were going to stay or not. After it wasn't me. I had nothing to do with that, but to do with whether it was going to be Brandywine or a different book at the time. Although I think you own that company now anyway, so you would have ended up in here regardless.
Yeah, we haven't quite got to the finish line yet, but
okay.
we'll get there soon enough.
But that's not you. Yeah. That's not private information. You're
no.
You're buying the company, right?
We've signed an agreement to buy basically the sports book leases that that Cantor has here in Las Vegas.
So the licensing.
When was that? About 2011, you said?
Yeah, we closed down in 2010 and we reopened in 2011.
Yeah.
And the licensee CEO at the time, before me, was talking to Cantor about taking over the sportsbook operations. And at the 11th hour, fortunately for me, we stayed with Joe and Brandywine. And then we got to know each other better. And actually, Joe, in the early days of me getting licensed, became sort of somewhat of a advisor. He came to some of our executive meetings to help me with the outside perspective on the business, and I think our friendship just grew from there. But I don't remember exactly when was the transition from Brandywine to William Hill.
Yeah, so we signed the agreement to sell the business to William Hill in May of 2011. But William Hill had to get licensed, and that took a little over a year. So the deal closed in June of 2012. And then that's when all the former Brandywine books, as well as the Calneva books and the old Leroy's books, all were rebranded to William Hill. So that's 7.5 years ago.
And you were chosen as the CEO out of all the companies that were bought.
Correct. And it was interesting because at the time, I had worked for a big law firm, and then I'd be, done something entrepreneurial and starting my own business. And then I was bought by this big company, and had no idea how long I'd wound up staying, actually. The CEO at the time
Of William Hill.
was
that Ralph?
It was Ralph. It was this very colorful.
There's a crazy
guy.
story. I'll tell it in 30 seconds. I had known Joe, and I'm on safari in South Africa, and I'm in a cart. There's me, my wife, my mother, and one other couple, and we get talking to this other couple, and he's got this big camera. He's into photography, and he says his name's Ralph Topping. We didn't talk anything really after that in the car. Then later at dinner, we're having some drinks, and we get talking. I tell him I live in Las Vegas, and he tells me he's the CEO or chairman of William Hill. The chances of me meeting that guy, and I told him I know Joe, obviously, and he's like, wow, that was in 2015 that I met him. 2015.
You have the most wild, coincidental interactions with people.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. And then he sent me photos from the safari we were on together in South Africa. But
Yeah.
I think he retired like a year later or a few months later even.
Yeah, Ralph was a really colorful guy, and had been with William Hill for a long time. I think he had like 40 years with the company. And when I sold the business, and he'd asked me to be the CEO, at the time I refused to sign an employment agreement. I said, look, I promise you I'll stay for a respectful period of time. And then after that, I'll stay as long as, you want me to stay, and as long as I'm happy. And, we'll just kind of see how it goes. And, never imagined that, here we are, 7.5 years later. And
How many books do you have now?
yeah, 100, it's about 145 across the country now.
And that is the biggest sports book company in the USA?
Yes, it is.
You guys are with sports betting royalty right now.
This is incredible. How many are in Nevada or in Las Vegas?
In Nevada, it's about 113, I think. And, I'd say it's probably 30 plus or minus in Las Vegas, 30, 35 in Las Vegas. And, people think of Nevada, they just think of Las Vegas, right? But we got a bunch up in Reno, and Primm is the border town with California on the I-15. We've got the ones down there, and then in northern Nevada on the on the border with Utah and Wendover, and on the other border with California, there's ones up in Lake Tahoe. Carson City, of course, is our state capital. Pahrump, about an hour outside of Vegas, probably known for other things, I suppose. But and then there's all these other random places in between. Elko, we got probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 up in Elko. We don't make any money, but I kind of like Elko anyway. And in some of these rural counties,
Right.
We're the only sports book there, and they're not particularly profitable, but you just do it just to so the local citizens have something, a place to go if they want to bet.
Are there other sports books there?
Not in the small counties. No, we get literally 100% of the market now. 100% of pretty little, but
Yeah.
A lot of it's brand awareness too, right? So if somebody from Elko is used to making bets with William Hill where they're at, and they come to Las Vegas, they're going to seek out a William Hill sportsbook to make their bet. That's where they're comfortable. That's where they're familiar with, right?
It is, yes, and it's also just kind of you want to have a presence,
Right.
Throughout the state, and you just want people to have somewhere to go, right? The alternative is there's nothing, and that doesn't.
Who is
seem
your
to be really
biggest
good.
competition?
It depends by market, right? So in Nevada, I think we've got about a third of the market overall.
Is that in terms of stores or in terms of handle?
In terms of revenue, in terms of win,
Okay.
we look at it based on revenue. Yeah, in terms of location.
Sorry, while you're on that, I noticed the Gaming Control Board released some new statistics based on mobile handle, and downtown was the biggest area in the state. How do they track that? How are they seeing that on mobile handle?
Well, with the problem, I would guess what they're doing, and I haven't actually looked at the report. They just started, breaking it out in the
Right.
reports. I assume they're doing it based on where the accounts are being considered to be based, if you will.
It's like where they're registered.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be where they registered, but clearly, for us, I think we've had most of the Southern Nevada account signups flowing through downtown from a tax perspective. It was more tax efficient.
Okay.
When you start factoring in the local taxes, and then maybe obviously Circa's doing the same. They just opened their sports betting business. So that's probably why, it doesn't necessarily mean that the people are physically present in downtown. It just means from a reporting perspective, the accounts are being reported.
Okay.
Joe, what are your thoughts on Circa claiming to be building a mega sports book across the street from where we're at now?
Yeah, well, look, I think, clearly investment in downtown we're a big fan of because, that's going to benefit the Plaza. It's going to benefit us as well. So we're all for folks who invest in Las Vegas, right? So much of our business is, flows from the investments that major casino companies make in this state.
More tourism.
More tourism, and when the bartender or the valet attendant at the Bellagio is making more in tips, he's got a little bit more in his pocket, and he's got a little bit more money to bet with us. And conversely, when the big operators aren't doing as well, we feel it as well because there's less money in circulation at the time. So I'll clearly be interested to see what they build over there. But my view generally on competition has always been as long as everybody's operating under the same rules. It's that's great. You shouldn't go changing the rules for somebody, right? When I came and started Brandywine back in 2008, there were rules about what you had to do to get the so-called predicate license, or the license you needed to operate. And I figured out how to do that in Elko through the existing regulations. And same sort of thing. If somebody wants to come into the market here, whatever the rules are, and you play by those rules. And
do you think
fine.
Though, that by having more competition downtown, especially within walking distance, you might see pressure on companies to be more competitive in the odds they're offering?
I don't. Time will tell. I don't think so, because the pricing pressure is pretty well defined, and the margins on sports betting are historically pretty thin. About 5% is the margin if a person bets $100. The sports book wins $5, and then has to pay all of its expenses.
Right.
From that 5%, and there's really no room to raise prices given how much competition exists in the market today. And then also you have the competition offshore from some of the illegal bookmakers offshore. I think to some extent maybe that could, in theory at least, have the effect of checking the prices. Although I've never had the sense that the offshore market is particularly relevant in Las Vegas, given the easy access to the legal market.
Right.
I think that's much more of an issue in other parts of the country, for sure.
Well, over the last 2 years, they've legalized sports betting nationwide, and it's up to each state now to regulate that. And you guys are now in that, going out and opening up sports books across the country now, right? Do you have any that you're looking at, or any markets that you're looking to expand into?
Well, the Supreme Court in May of 2018 overturned a law that had basically limited sports betting to Nevada, with a couple of very limited exceptions. Since then, we've opened up in a number of states: Jersey, Mississippi, New Mexico. We're in Delaware, Rhode Island, and there are a number of other states that are getting ready to open up as well. So it's pretty busy time, and the competitive dynamics are different in the various states. New Jersey, hyper competitive market. You have a lot of folks competing in that market. I don't think anybody's really making any money in New Jersey these days, other than the media companies and the guy who sells sponsorships for the New Jersey Devils hockey team.
And Joe, if you don't mind me saying, back in 2018 when they legalized it in New Jersey, that the first day that they opened was the same time as the East Coast Gaming Conference that you were a speaker at. I don't know if you recall back in 2018. I know it's been a busy few years for you. But it's just a personal story for me.
You were there?
I was there.
Okay.
I was there, and it was amazing to me because everybody was talking about whether or not to involve the professional sport in with it, and everybody was treating it like it was a new product. And I remember Joe being on stage saying, "We've been doing it in Nevada for years, and we've been doing it right. I don't understand why everybody's trying to reinvent the wheel here." Mm-hmm. And that just
stuck with you.
It really stuck with me. It was amazing. And do you remember that,
Joe?
I remember. I didn't even remember that it was the exact same day, but I remember
it was day one at the Borgata.
Yeah,
they opened.
Nice place. That's sort of one of the big conferences every year. There's obviously all these conferences now. Now they've added a whole bunch of new conferences. Those are the other people who are making money off of PASPA being overturned as these conference organizers. Man, they get like conferences like all over the place. I mean, it's crazy. I don't really understand the economics of their business. But you got the East Coast Gaming Conference. Of course, there's the one here in Vegas in the fall, G2E.
So, Jed, let me ask you, compared to some of the offshore accounts, there's a difference between, I know some people come out to Las Vegas, they're looking for some of those novelty bets, like betting on the presidential election or betting on, different things of that nature.
The next James Bond.
Who the next James Bond's going to be. What is, why is that different in Nevada or stateside versus maybe some offshore accounts or overseas?
Overseas, yeah. I mean, the rule in Nevada historically was you could bet on sports, and the outcome had to be determined on the field of play.
Okay.
And that got loosened up a little bit to add things like Super Bowl MVP or who's going to win some season-long award as well. But it's been generally in that area.
Okay.
There's a guy who was in the state senate here who kept trying to pass a bill to legalize betting on presidential elections, and it never really got any steam or anything.
Sure.
Betting on presidential elections is actually pretty big in the UK. There's a massive amount of betting on the last election, and Trump I think was like 50 to 1 or 100 to 1 when it all when it came down the escalator, and then as he kept advancing, the prices kept coming down and down. But it's always fun to watch the betting markets. I was over there in the summer and placed a bet on the election, and so because I travel, William Hill's a British company as we talked about, and so when I'm over, I've bet. I didn't bet in the last election over there. The time before, I bet on between Romney and Obama. After the first debate, I thought Obama was actually a pretty good price because he didn't do all that well in the first debate, so I bet on Obama then, and placed a bet last summer. I got the ticket in my pocket.
Based on your shirt and my knowledge of you, I can guess who your ticket's for.
Yeah, well, exactly. I pull it out right here. I went into.
He's got a William Hill ticket.
Actually, I think I left it. No, I can't bet at William Hill. So I bet at one of our competitors.
You could bet elsewhere in the state.
It's not a William. I know these tickets though. I've seen these tickets.
Yeah,
in my life.
It's from
Coral or Ladbrokes?
Coral.
Yeah.
I just handed the ticket to Jonathan.
He's got Joe Biden to win the 2020 election at 5 to 1, which is a good price now because he's almost even money now, and it's a $500 bet.
500 pounds.
£500 bet. £2,500 payout.
That's pretty good, right?
Can we
great.
take a picture of that?
Sure.
You're a great payout.
May have to black out some things on there when we.
All right, it's in the UK. Yeah, you probably.
Wait, what? This is an official.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, in England, you handwrite the tickets. In America, it's all printed out for you. But that's how I used to bet. I used to bet on horses and greyhounds by writing them out on a slip like that. And then they write the odds on it. That's not Joe's writing on the odds.
No, that's
that's the teller.
Person who took the
But Joe
wrote
Biden to win election.
It turned out to be a a bad bet in that I bet him right after the very first polls came out. He had been at like 8-1, like the day before I got there.
Okay.
And then the day I got there, the price had dropped to 5-1.
Just up until last week, he was probably.
And then he went back up. Yeah,
What was he? He must
he
have
was
been 20,
probably
30.
He was probably. I don't know if he was that. Yeah, it might have been. I don't know how high he got after New Hampshire. I mean, I know he was 10-1 to win the nomination after New Hampshire.
Right.
So he may have been 20, 25-1.
So I
wound
did,
up getting a bad price.
But you in the U.S., William Hill in the U.S. is offering odds on next president, and
Not in the U.S. In the U.K. We can't bet in the U.S. on president.
I thought I saw it on the U.S. line. No.
So where did you go to bet that?
In London.
You were just there.
I happened to be.
You
in
don't
London.
have odds on who's going to be the Raiders quarterback next summer?
We do on. I think we have a bet on.
Where will Tom Brady
Where's Tom
be?
Brady going to be?
So, but that's not determined on the field of play.
Yeah, they had to get that approved. It's actually where will he throw his first pass?
Yes.
What team will
Yeah.
he throw his first pass? Which will be on the field of play, but they ran it by the gaming control board to make sure it was okay.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because historically, I think we had wanted to do a bet on maybe it was LeBron James back when before he went to the Heat.
The decision.
And the gaming control board made us, and I think we had Worley take his first shot. I think it was him. It could have been a quarterback. I forget. Anyway, the gaming control board wouldn't allow it back then, and now they're more comfortable with that sort of stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he stays in New England.
I do too.
Right? I think
Pretty
he
sure
does.
he does. Although last night at the dinner series with Mark Davis, we all asked him, and he wouldn't tell us. He said, "Tom who?"
It's kind of a tough spot for Derek Carr. Right?
Oh yeah, no, it's not. It's not good. It's not nice. But
There's going to be a lot of quarterback changes going into this year. It's going to be a fun year.
Yeah, I mean, football, the product is so good these days, right? And you get these
ridiculous.
young quarterbacks like, Pat Mahomes and
Lamar Jackson,
Lamar
Deshaun
Jackson.
Watson.
Yeah, I mean,
Gary's an Eagles fan. They got no one.
what's wrong with Carson Wentz? I'm an Eagles fan.
I know you are. I know you are. That's why I said
Eagles
that.
fan.
I finally got some defense on this podcast. I'm glad. This is the
wrong
third or
with
fourth
Carson
time they've
Wentz?
brought this up.
How has Las Vegas sports teams affected betting?
And how has betting affected sports teams? There's two sides to that question. Look, I think that one of the things, and there were many, but one of the things that made the Golden Knights as popular as they were early on is people were betting them, and they were winning, so the people were winning, right?
Yeah.
And there's one thing that makes you love a team. It's when you're making money on them, and so in that first season of the Golden Knights, it was very quickly that people were backing them, pretty heavily, and had they won the Stanley Cup, we would have lost a few $1 million.
$250 to 1 at the beginning of the year, I think it was.
Yes, yeah, and then they just went on an unbelievable roll.
You would have lost a few
obviously.
$1 million, but the advertising would have been through the roof, and the PR.
Yeah,
And the amount of people hooked on sports betting on the Golden Knights would have been, although it still is huge, isn't it?
It still is huge, and people are still betting on the Golden Knights. They're betting in play. People love to bet the total goals scored in the first period. Pretty popular bet in hockey. They like to bet them on the. They also like to bet on the goal line or the puck line, meaning that they have to win by 1.5 goals.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes it's a 1-goal game, and then the other team pulls the goalie, and they start taking shots at the empty net to cover the puck line, or they're shooting.
They don't know they're covering the puck line, but
they may or may not. But
right.
the bettors all know.
You would hope they don't.
Yeah, you hope they're shooting just to win. They're shooting to win the game, obviously.
Right.
But the ripple-on effect of that is to is people make money when they cover the 1.5.
Do you think the Raiders will have the same impact, sports betting wise, as the Golden Knights?
Well, so hockey handle is definitely up materially. It's probably doubled since the Golden Knights came.
Wow.
And it's not just betting on the Golden Knights. It's now because now you have all these people who are hockey fans.
Right, you got much more interest into the sport now in Nevada.
Exactly, which you didn't have before. And I think that's maybe one of the things that made the Golden Knights as popular as they were. People have a football team, right? You're an Eagles fan. I'm an Eagles fan. People have a football team. They grow up around it. But a lot of people, they didn't have a hockey team, so it was easy to say, okay, I'm going to be a Golden Knights fan, because most people aren't hockey fans. I mean, my kids, they literally didn't know what ice hockey was 3.5 years ago. They didn't know what it was, right? They knew football, they knew soccer, they knew baseball, they knew what basketball. They had no idea what ice hockey was because we never watched it. It was never on TV, and nobody played it really. Now, they're like crazy about it. They know all the players. They've got, the posters that they give out at the games. Today is actually Golden Knights Day at their school. Wow. So that, they all went in their Golden Knights
They all got their
gear.
jerseys on and everything?
Yeah, they all
That's
got their jerseys on. We take them to the practices up in Summerlin.
City National Arena.
At City National Arena. Yeah, they go to the practices up there, and
Joe's a big fan. He kindly invites me to games.
It's
he has
great.
Season tickets.
Oh, I love
He has
it.
great tickets. He has the best tickets.
It's great.
Really?
I just think it's it's so much fun, right? It's just so much fun, and
They put on a great
we're all
show.
into it.
So,
You were there the other
It's
night
great
when they
show.
got donuts.
yes.
Yeah, I mean,
was
isn't
great.
that the most brilliant promotion too?
Yeah.
When the Golden Knights get a home shutout, everybody gets a free dozen donuts from Krispy Kreme.
It's huge.
It's the best, right? And sometimes there's like a mix. Sometimes like there's this superstition thing where you're not allowed to mention it until the game's over. But then I've also been there when people start chanting, "We want donuts! We want donuts!" Right? Yeah. And at one time, I think they gave up a goal with 30
They
seconds
did, yeah,
left or
yeah.
something, and Fleury
Yeah.
was crushed.
Yeah.
When he had this
Yeah.
unbelievable game, they won by a lot, and
But he didn't get the donuts.
He was crushed because they didn't get the donuts.
Great. Well, thank you, Joe.
We have one more question for you. What is
Awesome.
your favorite quote?
What is my favorite quote? Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Well, finally, you put him on the spot with something.
Well, one of them is an old Winston Churchill quote. We may disagree amongst ourselves as to, something to the effect of which way, how fast, and in which direction we shall move forward. But on this one point, we're all agreed we're not going back 1 inch. And, another one of his Churchill quotes was never, 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 never give up.
I have that on the office
I think
wall.
I was just about to say, I've seen that on the office wall.
You know, and since we talked about my Joe Biden ticket earlier, one of his great quotes that I love is, don't tell me your values, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value, which I think is pretty sharp too.
If do you see yourself ever getting into politics one day? Joe gets the nominee.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I follow it obviously pretty closely, and as Jonathan knows, I'm a big Joe Biden supporter, so I'm following it extra close this year, because I think he'd make a terrific president. So we'll see where we get to.
Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, it was
Thank you
fun.
so much. It was a
Thank you.
pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure.
We'll be right back in 60 seconds from On the Corner of Main Street.
I'm Steve Heitner, the guy who said those famous words, "That's gold." So that's the name of my podcast. That's Gold with Steve Heitner. We try to expand your horizons.
It's intense, but only for like 7 seconds at a time.
I've had relationships that ran about that. We keep up on breaking sports news.
Well, wait a minute. Drunks and fornicators, I think they met in the first round of their playoffs for the right to go to hell. I think that was the way that worked, yeah.
That was the play-in game.
We are patrons of the arts. Then I also love the idea of the fictional autobiography.
Well, I didn't want to be sued, as you've learned. It's not fun.
And we take you new places.
Stop first at the RV Museum in Elkhart, Indiana.
I hear they have an amazing roadkill wing in there. That's amazing.
You gotta say they actually have the first Winnebago that ever knocked a deer into the side pocket.
We're here for you twice a week. That's Gold with me, Steve Heitner.
Thank you so much for listening. That's it for today. We'll be back next week with another episode of On the Corner of Main Street. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and tell your friends about us. And we have brand new social channels. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at otcoms.podcast. That's OTCOMS.podcast. And you can tweet Joe Asher at Joe Asher or at William Hill US. And of course, you can tweet Jonathan at Jonathan Jossel and send us an email to podcast@plazahotelcasino.com. See you next time.